In 1943, the Luftwaffe dismissed the B-26 Marauder as little more than a nuisance, just another blip among their heavy bomber obsessions. But by the summer of '44, Germany's entire daytime movement was nearly paralyzed, its rail lines shattered by blistering raids from those very same secondary bombers. The Americans called it tactical innovation. German aces called it something else. Adolf Galland, the Reich's top fighter commander, later admitted the Marauder became the one Allied aircraft he least liked to attack, even in a jet. So what exactly forced the German war machine to flip from arrogance to urgent fear? The shocking truth about what Germany thought of the B-26 Marauder is nothing like you've heard, and the consequences changed the fate of the Western Front. German air doctrine in the early 1940s revolved around one overriding threat: the heavy bomber. Luftwaffe generals and staff officers, shaped by the trauma of British night raids and the growing specter of American four-engine bombers, organized their entire day fighter force to meet massed, high-altitude incursions. Training manuals drilled pilots on intercepting tight box formations of B-17 and B-24 bombers at altitudes above 20,000 feet. Aircraft loadouts reflected this obsession. Fighters armed with heavy cannons and rockets, optimized for shattering dense bomber streams, not chasing nimble targets at lower levels. The backbone of this defensive web was the Kammhuber line, a sprawling grid of radar, searchlights, and night fighters stretching from Denmark to France. Each sector was designed to funnel incoming bombers into controlled kill zones, where specialized units could concentrate firepower. But the system, for all its complexity, was built to counter one threat: deep penetration raids by heavy bombers. In 1943, Luftwaffe day fighter Gruppen received fuel, maintenance, and replacement pilots based on their ability to blunt these strategic raids. Medium bombers, fast, lower flying, and often operating in smaller numbers, were left to second-line units or simply ignored as a strategic afterthought. Leadership at the highest levels reinforced this tunnel vision. Intercept altitudes were set high, with patrol lines drawn far from the front, anticipating the next wave of American heavies heading for the Ruhr or Berlin. Tactical briefings, even in the face of mounting Allied activity over France and the Low Countries, rarely mentioned medium bombers as more than a nuisance, targets of opportunity rather than primary threats. The assumption was simple: a medium bomber might disrupt a rail yard or bridge, but it could not threaten the Reich's industrial heart or alter the course of the war. Throughout 1943, Luftwaffe fighter wings continued to drill for massed, high-altitude combat, refining formation attacks and defensive maneuvers against the heavy bomber box. The priority was always the same: stop the big raids, and the war could still be managed. Medium bombers, by contrast, were seen as a distraction, a tactical problem for the flak gunners or local commands, not a strategic concern for the Reich's air defense masterminds. This doctrine, deeply rooted and fiercely defended, would shape every decision as the storm gathered over Western Europe. In 1943, German staff officers spoke of medium bombers with a kind of practiced indifference. In captured memos, the term nuisance raid appears beside notations for B-26 attacks on rail yards and airfields in France, a label meant to keep the focus squarely on the looming threat of American heavies. Even Adolf Galland, then Inspector of Fighters, brushed off concerns in his internal lecture notes, reminding Gruppen commanders that tactical bombers were a distraction from the real business of defending the Reich. Briefings described Marauder raids as harassment, to be handled by local flak or second-line fighters. The message was clear: The real war was happening at 20,000 feet, where the outcome of the air campaign would be decided. This attitude trickled down through the ranks. Fighter allocation sheets from the spring of 1943 showed A units clustered around deep penetration routes, with few sorties assigned to the lower, faster streams of mediums. Even as B-26s began to appear in greater numbers over occupied territory, their missions were filed away as minor disruptions, irritants, not existential threats. In one staff conference transcript, a senior operations officer dismissed the latest bridge strike near Rouen with a shrug. They hit a few wagons, the main line will be running again by morning. Yet underneath the official confidence, hints of unease crept into the margins. After-action notes from several Gruppen mentioned the unexpected persistence of Marauder formations and the mounting difficulty of catching them before they vanished into cloud or coastal haze. Still, the prevailing wisdom held. As late as autumn, Galland's own summary for OKL headquarters insisted that medium bombers, while annoying, could not threaten the Reich's war effort. The doctrine was set. Mediums would be managed by routine defenses until the heavy bombers were broken. Or so the staff believed, as the true test of that assumption loomed ever closer. With the Marauder, speed wasn't just a number. It was a shield. Twin Pratt and Whitney R-2800 engines pushed the B-26 to 285 miles per hour, faster than any Allied medium bomber and outpacing many enemy fighters below 15,000 feet. High wing loading, nearly 50 pounds per square foot, gave the Marauder a dense, clean profile that sliced through the air with minimal drag. Pilots described the sensation as flying a bullet, unforgiving at low speeds, but once up to cruising altitude, the controls settled and the aircraft ran smooth and true. German interceptors trained to stalk lumbering heavies found themselves chasing a target that didn't fit their playbook. The B-26's approach speed alone, often 130 to 140 miles per hour, left little margin for error. Fighters banking in for a shot had seconds to line up before the formation shot past, defensive guns already tracking them. At medium altitude, the Marauder's speed forced attackers into rushed, shallow dives. The Luftwaffe's favorite high-angle slashing attacks, so effective against older bombers, lost their edge against a formation that could accelerate out of harm's way. That velocity wasn't just about survival in a straight line. It let box formations maneuver as a single unit, tightening up at the first sign of trouble, then breaking away before German fighters could regroup. The Marauder didn't rely on armor to shrug off hits. It used speed to avoid them altogether. In after-action reports, crews credited their escape to the engines as much as the gunners. The numbers backed them up. By 1944, the B-26 posted the lowest loss rate of any USAAF bomber in Europe. For German pilots used to easy prey, the Marauder's performance was a rude awakening. It didn't just outrun danger, it rendered old intercept tactics obsolete. With the Marauder, defense was geometry in motion. Crews drilled to assemble 18 aircraft into a box, 3 flights of 6, each flight a tight V, each box a wall of overlapping fire. At 10,000 to 15,000 feet, this formation was more than a pattern. It was a fortress. The lead aircraft carried the bombardier's glass nose, but most were gunships bristling with .50 caliber machine guns. 4 fixed guns in the nose, twin turrets above and behind, waist guns, and a power-driven tail turret. Every quadrant covered, every approach a gauntlet. Spacing was deliberate. 50 to 100 feet wingtip to wingtip within a flight, staggered vertically by up to 200 feet. That kept bomb runs clean and fields of fire open. Each gunner knew his arc. Side gunners swept the beams, dorsal turrets covered high and behind. Tail gunners waited for the head-on pass that German pilots favored. The Marauder's design let these arcs overlap. A fighter attacking one bomber found itself in the sights of three more. German pilots learned the hard way that a straight-in attack meant flying through a curtain of lead. The B-26's speed forced interceptors to close fast, leaving them seconds to fire before defensive guns locked on. Reports from the Luftwaffe called the Marauder box unbreakable at medium altitude. After-action notes from German units described how attacks from above or below were met with coordinated, converging fire. The box didn't just defend, it punished attackers. Inside, teamwork was everything. Pilots held formation through turbulence and flak. Gunners called out enemy positions, shifted fire, and covered blind spots for their neighbors. When one aircraft took a hit, the box tightened, closing the gap, keeping the wall intact. By 1944, this discipline paid off in cold numbers, the lowest loss rate of any Allied bomber in Europe. For the crews, survival wasn't just about armor or speed, it was about holding the line, gun to gun, wing to wing. Rail traffic in northern France began to vanish almost overnight. By May 1944, the French National Railway was running at just 15% of its February capacity. Allied planners had called for a systematic chokehold, and the Marauder groups delivered it with relentless precision. In a single month, B-26 crews flew over 3,500 sorties against rail bridges and marshalling yards, dropping more than 8,000 tons of bombs. The impact was immediate. German supply trains moving through the region dropped by 85% compared to the spring. Where 40 trains a day once threaded the lines to Normandy, now barely 6 made the journey, and most never reached their destination. The numbers told the story. In June, the average was just 2.4 German supply trains entering Normandy each day. By July, it ticked up only slightly to 2.7. The first German supply train didn't cross into the region until June 14th, 8 days after the Allied landings. Locomotive repair shops and rail yards, once bustling with activity, became twisted wreckage. Bomb craters blocked main lines, bridges lay in the river, and entire junctions were reduced to blackened skeletons. For every bridge rebuilt under cover of darkness, a fresh wave of marauders returned at dawn. Precision bombing crews working from detailed target maps and real-time intelligence. The transportation plan didn't just slow German movement, it strangled it. By August, Allied analysts reported that daylight movement of German military trains through northern France had been virtually stopped. The Marauder's role was central. Its crews, flying at medium altitude in tight formation, hit bridges with accuracy rates that astonished even their own commanders. Every destroyed span forced German convoys onto longer, slower detours, easy prey for fighter bombers waiting overhead. The effect rippled across the front, isolating entire divisions, grounding reinforcements, and leaving Rommel's tanks stranded miles from the beaches. For the German High Command, the transportation grid had become a graveyard of lost time and wasted fuel, all under the shadow of the Marauders' crosshairs. At dawn on August 9, 1944, 30 B-26 Marauders from the 394th Bomb Group thundered toward the L'Isle-Adam Bridge northwest of Paris, a lifeline for the German retreat across the Seine. In the lead sat Captain Darrell Lindsay, a pilot already known for his calm under fire, now tasked with breaking the last crossing before German armor could escape. The sky over the target was thick with black bursts from 88mm flak, the kind that shredded aluminum and nerves alike. Lindsay's formation pressed in, engines roaring at full throttle, the river below flickering through gaps in the cloud. Midway through the bomb run, a shell struck Lindsay's right engine. Flames erupted, licking back along the wing. The Marauder, heavy with bombs, shuddered but held its line. Lindsay's voice came over the intercom, steady and clipped, ordering the crew to stay on target. He kept the battered B-26 locked in formation, refusing to break away and risk scattering the bombing pattern. The bridge filled the bomb site. Lindsay gave the call. Bombs fell in a tight stick, erupting along the span as the formation broke away, chased by flak and smoke. With the right wing ablaze, Lindsay leveled the Marauder, buying precious seconds for his crew. One by one, the men bailed out, tumbling into the summer air. Lindsay stayed at the controls, holding the burning bomber steady until the last man was clear. Only then did the plane dip, trailing fire as Lindsay rode it down. He never made it out. The bridge was left in ruins, the German escape cut short. Every member of Lindsay's crew survived. For his final act, leading the attack, saving his men, and finishing the mission, he was awarded the Medal of Honor. The Marauder's legacy was not just in numbers or tactics, but in moments like this, when precision, resolve, and sacrifice collided over a single stretch of river. 12 Me-262 jets, the pride of Jagdverband 44, swept in over southern Bavaria on April 20, 1945. Their target wasn't the lumbering four-engine giants that had haunted German nightmares for years, but a stream of B-26 Marauders, medium bombers once dismissed as mere irritants. Galland himself led the attack, his squadron loaded with R-4M air-to-air rockets, each jet bristling with enough firepower to rip through a formation in seconds. The Marauders, flying box-tight at medium altitude, pressed on toward their bridge targets near Memmingen. As the jets closed, the sky erupted. R-4M rockets streaked into the formation, detonating beneath the bombers with a force that sent shockwaves through the airframe. Captain James Vining's B-26 took a hit that blew out the control pedestal, shattering the instrument panel and nearly severing the rudder cables. He handed the controls to his co-pilot, then managed a single-engine return, the bomber trailing smoke but refusing to break formation. Throughout the box, gunners unleashed streams of .50 caliber fire, forcing the Me-262s to break off or risk flying through a hail of tracers. The numbers told a story that defied old assumptions. 3 Marauders went down, 1 was written off after landing, and 10 more limped home shot full of holes. But the cost to JV-44 was steep. At least 1 jet fell to defensive fire, and Galland himself took a hit that ended his combat flying for good. In the chaos, Unteroffizier Schallmoser's Me-262 collided with a Marauder's propeller, losing half his rudder before bailing out over his mother's garden. The Marauder he struck, a battered, smoking wreck, still managed to reach Allied lines. For JV-44, these attacks were anything but routine. Elite pilots flying the world's fastest fighters found themselves locked in running battles with bombers they'd once ignored. R-4M rockets gave them a punch, but the Marauder boxes absorbed it and kept going. The Luftwaffe's last, best hope was now spent chasing mediums across a collapsing front, each sortie a gamble with fewer jets, less fuel, and no margin for error. The old calculus, reserve your best for the heavies, had been overturned in a matter of weeks. Even in the final days, the Marauder forced the Reich's most advanced weapons and pilots to answer a threat they'd never expected to fear. Adolf Galland, the Luftwaffe's most decorated fighter commander, sat in the shadow of defeat and told Allied interrogators what no one expected to hear. The B-26 Marauder, he admitted, was the one Allied aircraft he least liked to attack, even in the cockpit of an Me-262 jet. For a man who'd spent his career hunting bombers, the confession carried the weight of hard numbers and harder lessons. Galland's words weren't empty sentiment. They were backed by a record that stunned even the Americans. By 1945, the B-26 posted a loss rate of less than 0.5%, lower than any other USAAF bomber in the European theater. The official ETO loss tables, compiled after the war, put the figure at just 0.48% per sortie. That meant for every 200 missions flown, only a single Marauder failed to return. The numbers cut through myth and memory alike. More than 110,000 sorties flown, 150,000 tons of bombs dropped. Yet the Marauder's losses barely registered on the charts that track the daily grind of attrition. While B-17 and B-24 groups measured survival in percentages and empty bunks, B-26 crews returned in numbers that defied the odds. The secret was never just speed or firepower, or even the tight box formations that bristled with .50 caliber guns. It was the sum of all these, multiplied by discipline and a doctrine that valued precision over brute force. The Marauder forced the Luftwaffe to rethink every rule of engagement, from attack angles to ammunition expenditure. In post-war testimony, Galland didn't mince words. The Marauder was the most difficult target of all. Its speed, its formation discipline, and the accuracy of its fire made it a very unpleasant opponent, even for a jet pilot. He saw what the loss tables confirmed. The Marauder had rewritten the risk calculus for every German pilot ordered to intercept. For the Luftwaffe, the realization came too late. The numbers Galland cited weren't just statistics. They were the final verdict on a doctrine that had underestimated the threat until the evidence was impossible to ignore. By August 1944, official German reports confirmed that daylight movement by rail was virtually impossible, evidence of the B-26 Marauder's decisive effect. What began as a so-called nuisance evolved into a threat so severe that elite Me-262 jet units and new R-4M rockets were assigned specifically to intercept these medium bombers. Adolf Galland's post-war testimony, "The B-26 was the Allied aircraft I least liked to attack, even in the Me-262, marked a striking reversal from early dismissals found in Luftwaffe memos. Yet, some German operational documents and loss records remain classified, leaving unanswered exactly how High Command recalibrated in the final months. What is clear, the B-26's combination of speed, precision, and survivability forced a fundamental shift in German air defense, validated by its record as the USAAF's lowest loss bomber. Today, declassified files confirm that doctrinal blind spots can alter the course of war, sometimes only recognized too late by those who first underestimated the threat.